that happened overnight in Venezuela. Check out this video showing people panicking as they rush into the streets of Caracas with buildings collapsing around them. Officials say the death toll has been growing exponentially in the hours since and will likely get worse. And this morning, there's a desperate search for survivors. Earlier on CBS Mornings, we heard from journalist Tony Frangi Mawad, who was in an elevator in Caracas when the first quake struck.
Yeah, it was actually quite terrifying. I was to head to see the World Cup match with my friends because it was a holiday. It was a free day in Caracas. Everybody was in their homes or just outside of work or school. And when I just headed out of my home and took the elevator, I felt it moving and then moving really fast. So at first I thought it was malfunctioning, but then my friend who was with me tells me that it's probably an earthquake. And we just hope for the best. And I started to pray and to press every button, waiting for it to open up.
All right, joining us this morning is CBS News national correspondent Lilia Luciano, who's been covering this for us. So, Lilia, you have extensive contacts in Venezuela. What are they telling you?
People are shocked. I can say that. There's a great deal of worry for the thousands of people who are still missing. The death toll right now is at 164, just over 160. That is likely a microscopic number compared to what could happen in terms of a death toll. Some of the experts said it could be 10,000 people. Some have raised the number far beyond that. Right now, what people are saying is, the cell phone signal was impacted, so sometimes people can't get through to their loved ones. They're seeing the images of these collapsed buildings. Caracas is a city that has many buildings. The structures, it's not a place that's very common for earthquakes. So even though there have been in the past, and there are some structures that have been built with that in mind, especially after the 60s and 70s, now what we are seeing is just many floors, the buildings pancaked, and so people are very worried about their loved ones, about their country. I've seen so many people have written to me saying, we can't deal with anything else. Venezuela has gone through so much. There was already such dire need, even for food. Where are all of these people who now lost their homes but survived are going to go? And I have covered, as you have, Vlad, too, these earthquakes. The work that goes into recovery, search and rescue, and then search and recovery takes weeks and weeks.
I will say, Lilia, to that point, and this is perhaps some small, very small moment of solace for people who are looking for loved ones in the wake of some of the earthquakes I've covered, including in Haiti back in 2010, people were being discovered some 5 and even 6 days after the initial quake struck. So if you happen to be in a building that has collapsed, but you have an air pocket, and even oftentimes, I know it's crazy, but people will actually have access to water from pipes that have been damaged or destroyed during the earthquake. We found even children as young. I remember there was a young boy named Manoochehr Shirzaei, who I'm still in touch with. He was 5 years old when he was pulled out of the rubble 5 days after the quake struck. And then the 6th day, there was an 80-something-year-old woman who was pulled out of the basement of a church alive.
That's so important to keep in mind those stories of hope. But yeah, people are absolutely desperate. The U.S. is responding. Many countries have offered their help. I was just reading a tweet from Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, who's also offered. I've been in touch with rescue teams one from Mexico. They were planning the logistics. It's very complicated because in Caracas, the airport has significant damage in the runway, in the airport. We, of course, need visas to get to Venezuela. So
do you think that they will, I know it's often difficult in countries where journalist visas are very hard to come by. Do you think because the United States is going to be sending support and help, according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that they will make an exception and allow journalists to come in?
Well, I have had some conversations this morning, and what I'm getting is it's not a priority right now for foreign journalists. The priority is for the search and rescue teams. So ones that those are approved once they figure out where the teams are coming from, the equipment, the supplies, aid, all of that. And this has been the case in the past. It takes a while to get there, but there are incredible journalists in Venezuela who are certainly taking this story around the world. And of course, social media we have seen how catastrophic this is. So there's a great deal of concern for Venezuelans, of course, who are abroad. There's still so many Venezuelans in exile, so many people who have their families there and are growing desperate by the hour, not hearing from them. This is going to be, it's going to take a very long time. On top of the recovery that Venezuela was already in the process of just starting.
Yeah.
Lilia, I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Lilia,
you
for your reporting and your perspective.
For more on this, let's bring in Manoochehr Shirzaei. He's a professor of geophysics and environmental security at Virginia Tech. Professor, I mean, these were back-to-back earthquakes that happened overnight. What struck you when you heard of what had happened?
First of all, my thought and prayers goes to people who are affected by that. So, the region is earthquake prone. So we had the history of such events in the past, at least 100, 150 years. So I was not surprised to see that. But again, the scale of the devastation and damage is shocking.
So help people understand the concept of aftershocks. I recall in the wake of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, some of the most frightening moments were those aftershocks because, and the mind plays, the mind is a very powerful thing. When you see the devastation, you see the amount of death in the streets and in the surrounding areas, you immediately, the minute you see it or feel an aftershock, your mind races to that, and so you try to get to safety. I recall one night there was a very big aftershock, and the people that were now living in the town square, they were just screaming because of those aftershocks. Help us understand how unusual it is for two separate earthquakes of this magnitude to occur in less than 60 seconds.
So this is actually not very uncommon. So doublets, we call them. So sometimes the separation is so short that we combine them together as one big earthquake. But sometimes we have the chance to have a few seconds separation between the two. So the smaller one that occurs usually first, we call it as a foreshock, and then the big one that comes later, we call it as main shock. And when we have some massive earthquake, stress fields perturb in the region. Many small faults reactivate or activate to form, and that causes occurrence of many aftershocks. As we noticed actually following this earthquake over the last night, there has been many smaller earthquakes that added to the fear and unfortunately damage and destruction of that event.
I also want to ask you, we saw earthquakes in Japan, California. This makes 4 seismic events over the course of about 24 hours. Is there any correlation between all of this, or is this just completely separate?
So the short answer is no. Because of the distance from this earthquake and also size of this earthquake, we do not expect a direct relationship between those events in California and Japan.
All right, Manoochehr Shirzaei, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.